Okay, now this morning, we have kind of a rare treat. Rare because I haven't seen the man give a presentation for some while, but he's been a friend of our chapter. He's a member of the Plano chapter, and even though he's a native of Fort Worth, but he also told me this morning that way back in time, his grandfather was a member of the Dallas chapter. Not many people can say that. So without further ado, our friend from Plano, Dan Reed.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Good morning. Good to see you. I recognize any number of people out here this morning, and I'm so glad to see you, and I'll try to be as boring as possible. What I wanted to tell you just a little bit about my family. My grandfather, whose name was Byron Beecher Columbus Williams, and he lived in the shadow of the old wooden roller coaster at Fair Park. He worked not at the Ford plant, but he worked for the Texas and Pacific Railroad, and I think he never worked a day outside of the Ford plant down on Grand Avenue. And this is a part of history that we all forget about. And that's my grandfather. My son-in-law, who lives in Columbia, Tennessee, and my daughter, who takes care of the Polk house there in Columbia. That was James Polk's hometown. His name is William Jack Crawford III. And William Jack Crawford I lived in the shadows of the roller coaster at Fair Park and worked at the Ford plant, badge number 3. And during the Depression, he worked every day at the Ford plant under the supervision of Henry Ford, oiling the assembly line so that it could be reopened when they started making cars there again. And his family was very, very proud of that situation. And now I'll start in with my program. I have with me today an unusual piece of United States history. And I'll start by saying that this is the first rifle musket ever used or made by the U.S. government. And these were contract because at Harper's Ferry, which was open, and at Springfield, Missouri, where they were making these things, the government didn't own a machine that put rifles in the barrels. They could only make smooth bores. So they contracted out to a Philadelphia gunmaker named Henry Derringer. Ever heard the name? Well, of course you have, and everybody knows why. To make these rifle muskets. When I first saw this one, I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the end of the barrel and put my hand in it's smooth bore. And I said, well, how can it be rifle? When you take a little flashlight and stand it down there, exactly 2.5 inches down in here, the rifling start and go down. And I thought, what in the world did they make that for? Well, you remember they used to bite the bullet? They bit the end off of that paper cartridge and stuck that paper cartridge in there and then rammed it down. And if you had riflings up here at the end of the barrel, you couldn't get the paper cartridge in it. So they fixed it where you could take a round out of your cartridge box, put it in here. And these rifles were manufactured starting in 1814. And you say, well, wait a minute, this is a percussion cap rifle. Yeah, it is, but if you'll notice around here, you'll see that it used to have holes in it where they had all the flintlock mechanism on them. These were made as flintlocks. And these were ordered right at the end of the official end of the War of 1812. And these were to be used on the frontier. They had no bayonet lock because they didn't want bayonets on the rifles. These were to be made to fight our indigenous population that we were engaged at. Number one, the Seminoles in Florida. That's what this was made for. These rifles are clearly marked U.S. on them. They're clearly marked with Henry Derringer, and they were used in every war from 1814. First ones were probably not really produced till about 1815 by the time they made them, up until and through the Civil War. And in the 1870s, there were still some of these that had been converted to percussion in the California National Guard armories in the state of California. They had been issued to. This particular one, I first saw it about 1945, I guess, in the closet of my grandmother's house. And of course, I just looked at it and thought, well, it's an old gun. And being back then, you know, a kid in Fort Worth, if you had an old gun, that was a show and tell deal. You could take that to school, you could do anything with it you want to. Nobody cared about it then. But I always wondered how in the world this ended up in my grandmother's closet. And I'm going to try to tell you the rest of the story about that. Let me back up over here. May have some people at the back of the room that can't hear me. My grandmother Reed was born Gracie Ann Dotson, D-O-T-S-O-N, in Cridersville, Ohio, in 1870. And she died in Fort Worth in 1974. That's right, she was 104 years old. And she was the last Reed Dotson from that generation to survive. And we have no idea how she lived that long, except she did. And we don't have any secrets of life, but in her closet was this particular rifle. And in her bedroom, there was a little corner stand, and in that corner there were pictures of two gentlemen in Civil War uniforms. And I always wondered who those guys were. And years after she died, I got a hold of all the family pictures, and some of my relatives told me, well, said, this gentleman is your great-grandfather, Samuel Dotson. And he enlisted in the 81st Ohio Volunteer Infantry in 1862 as a 29-year-old sergeant. And I said, how did he enlist as a sergeant? Well, he could read and write. He owned a store in Cridersville, and he could read and write and cipher and do other things. So apparently they needed somebody that could do that, so they gave him the rank of sergeant to enter. And apparently he wasn't supposed to do much fighting. And we think this musket was issued to him because it had no place on it to carry a bayonet. And of course the tactics at that time in the Civil War were, we lined up a regiment across and we charged across a field in a straight line and mowed each other down, because our tactics hadn't caught up with the fact that these rifles would shoot 300 yards accurately instead of 50 yards like the smooth bores did. So we think that's how this ended up in our closet, but we're not sure. But his mother's name was Mary Magdalena Deffenbaugh. And her great-grandfather was Daniel Deffenbaugh, and he was a captain in the New York State Militia during the Civil War, and is fortunately one of my ancestors, although I have not proved it. But actually, being retired, I can't afford it anymore, if you know what I mean. But that other picture that was in the thing was of my grandfather Mason. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out how a Reed and a Dotson and a Williams ended up with a grandfather Mason. Well, my Reed great-grandfather died in 1863 in Lima, Ohio, and nobody knows why. Guess he just died, as people got sick back then and died. He was not in the military. He worked in a boiler factory where they made boilers. But in about 1873, my great-great-grandmother Reed married a soldier out of Samuel Dotson's Civil War unit, and his name was Sumner Mason. And so he became, I guess, my step great-great-great-grandfather. And all the Reed children that my grandmother had were named after some of these people. And I guess that's the rest of the story. So now you know how a musket from the 1814 era ended up probably serving in the Civil War with my great-great-grandfather Samuel Dotson. And I hope that was interesting, and thank you for your kind listening. Thank you.
I'm from Ohio.
All Ohio. I love it, yeah.
Stay right here. Mr. Jerry, would you join me? Would you join me here for a minute? We're going to do some more of the Tom and Jerry show.
Hey, I love it.
Dan, in recognition of your effort this morning and that presentation, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We hope you'll make yourself a visitor whenever you wish. Since you have a grandfather who used to be in this chapter, we'd like to present you with our certificate of appreciation.
Thank you.
I have you move out here because I'm sure they're going to do some photo ops.
I'll tell you what, is that a Liberty Bell?
No.
No, you didn't tell me that it would be something other than a Liberty Bell.
It's
Very few people have these.
Oh, man.
Okay.
I love it.
Check it out.
Oh, thank you very,
This is our
very
90th
much.
anniversary mug,
I'm aware of that.
and you have a 90th anniversary pin too.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
And if you come back, we'll give you ink for the picture.
Yeah, we'll give you ink if you come back
Whatever.
again, exactly.
Why, Jerry, take a look at it.
Yeah, I have to look at
Oh, yeah, just trying to protect you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
You bet.